The House That Whispers.
Why did you let him kill me?
They called it Blackwood Manor. It had been abandoned for over 50 years, standing at the edge of town like a corpse too stubborn to decay. No one knew why the last owners vanished overnight, leaving behind furniture, photographs, and dinner plates still set on the table. Some said the house whispered at night. Others swore they saw shadows moving inside when no one was there. Danny didn't believe in ghost stories. He was 16, rebellious, and looking for a thrill. When his friends dared him to spend the night in Blackwood Manor, he accepted without hesitation. Armed with a flashlight and a phone, Danny stepped inside just as the sun disappeared behind the trees. The air was thick, stale, heavy with something unseen. The floor creaked under his weight as he made his way through the grand foyer. The chandelier above was coated in dust, its crystals swaying ever so slightly as if disturbed by an invisible hand. Then came the whispers. At first, he thought it was just the wind slipping through the cracks. But the voices grew louder, surrounding him, filling the empty rooms with unintelligible murmurs. His heart pounded. He turned a corner and saw a grand mirror, its glass cracked, its reflection warped. But it was what stood behind him that made his breath hitch, a figure. Tall, thin, hollow-eyed, Danny spun around, but there was nothing there. He turned back to the mirror. The figure was closer now, its skeletal hand reaching toward him. The whispers became shrieks, the air turned frigid, his breath visible in the dim light. He stumbled back, the old wooden floor groaning beneath his weight, then snapping, he fell. Darkness swallowed him whole. The next morning, his friends came looking for him. They found his flashlight flickering in the grand foyer. His phone lay cracked on the floor, the screen frozen on a single, chilling image, a mirror, and in its reflection, Danny, screaming as skeletal hands dragged him into the darkness. They never found his body. But sometimes, when the night is silent and the wind is still, Blackwood Manor whispers his name. Danny was gone. Or at least, that's what everyone thought. His friends never spoke of that night again, and Blackwood Manor remained undisturbed for years, until Emily moved to town. She had never heard the stories. Never knew about Danny or the others who had disappeared. She only saw the house as a perfect subject for her photography portfolio, decayed, eerie, full of history. One cloudy afternoon, she crossed the rotting threshold, camera in hand. The air inside was thick with dust and something else, something ancient. She clicked the shutter, capturing the eerie beauty of the abandoned halls. Then, in the foyer, she saw the mirror. Its glass was cracked, but strangely reflective. She raised her camera and took a shot. The flash illuminated the space for a fraction of a second, and that's when she saw him, a boy. Gaunt. Hollow-eyed. Trapped behind the glass, Emily stumbled back, heart racing. But curiosity gnawed at her. Carefully, she stepped closer, raising her camera again. The figure in the mirror mimicked her movements, but his expression was one of silent desperation. His lips moved, forming words she couldn't hear. She wiped the dust from the glass. Danny's voice filled her ears. "Help me." A cold hand clamped around her wrist. She screamed, yanking away, but the pull was stronger, strong enough to send her tumbling forward, straight into the mirror. And then, silence. Emily's camera clattered to the floor, the lens shattered. In the mirror, her reflection was gone, but now, standing in the grand foyer, was Danny, alive. Real. Free. He blinked in confusion, staring down at his hands as if seeing them for the first time in years. A slow, disbelieving smile spread across his face. He was out, and behind him, trapped in the mirror's warped glass, was Emily. Her hands pounded against the surface, her screams muffled by the curse that had claimed her. The whispers returned, but now, they spoke her name. Danny didn't hesitate. He turned and ran, leaving Blackwood Manor behind, never looking back. The house had made its trade. One soul for another, and it was satisfied, for now. Danny never spoke of what had happened inside Blackwood Manor. He told himself he had imagined it all, the whispers, the mirror, Emily's terrified face staring back at him from the glass. He convinced himself he had blacked out, that she had run off before he woke up, but deep down, he knew the truth. Months passed. Danny tried to rebuild his life. His parents were relieved to have him back, but he felt different. Sometimes, he would wake up in the middle of the night with the sensation that he was still trapped, suffocating behind the glass. Other times, he swore he could hear Emily whispering his name from the shadows of his bedroom. Then one morning, he found a photograph on his desk. He hadn't put it there. It was a picture of Blackwood Manor's grand foyer. The image was grainy, as if taken in a hurry. But in the reflection of the mirror, he could see Emily, her hollow eyes filled with rage. And beside her, something else, a shadowy figure. Watching. Waiting. His hands trembled as he flipped the photo over. Scrawled on the back, in a handwriting he didn't recognize, were 4 words, "You were never real." Danny's stomach lurched. His pulse pounded in his ears. Memories began to unravel, fractured images flashing through his mind like broken glass. His childhood. His parents. His friends. Everything he thought he knew suddenly felt wrong, and then, the whispers returned. This time, they weren't coming from the house, they were inside him. He stumbled to the mirror in his bedroom, gripping the edges of the frame as he peered into his own reflection. His breath caught in his throat, his face was there. But it wasn't his, not really. Because deep in the reflection, standing behind his eyes, was Emily, and she was smiling. Danny staggered back from the mirror, his heart slamming against his ribs. Emily's reflection grinned at him, but the expression wasn't hers. It was something else, something wearing her face like a mask. Then the whispers spoke again, but this time, they formed words. "How does it feel to be the copy?" Danny's breath hitched. What? The reflection twisted. Emily's face flickered, distorting, revealing flashes of something darker, something ancient, shifting beneath her skin. "Did you think you escaped?" Danny's memories began to fracture. He saw himself as a child, laughing with his parents, playing with friends, going to school. But something was wrong. The details blurred, like an unfinished painting. Faces warped, places dissolved into static. The memories weren't his, they were constructed. "You never left the mirror, Danny. You never existed outside of it." His hands trembled. He reached out, pressing his palm against the cold glass. His reflection did not mimic him. It stared back on its own, head tilting in amusement, and then the final, sickening realization hit him. The real Danny had never escaped Blackwood Manor. What had walked out that night was a copy, a hollowed-out replica created to take his place. The house had swapped him for Emily, but only in the world's eyes. His real self was still inside, trapped where he had always been. He tried to scream, but his voice was gone. The mirror rippled like liquid, and suddenly, he was falling back into the glass. The world around him shattered, and for a brief moment, he saw the truth. Blackwood Manor was more than an old house. It was a doorway, a machine, a feeding ground. It lured people in, broke them apart, and created versions of them to walk the earth while the originals were imprisoned forever. Danny had been one of many, and now, it was Emily's turn. As he hit the dark void beyond the mirror, he caught one last glimpse of his reflection, the other Danny. The one who had been living his life. That Danny smirked and reached up to touch the glass. "Goodbye, Danny." And then, the world on the other side disappeared, the whispers laughed, and the house continued waiting for its next victim. Danny felt himself being pulled back into the mirror. Darkness swallowed him, cold and endless, as the whispers mocked him. "You were never real, you never left, you belong to us." But something inside him snapped. No, Danny refused to be trapped. Memories, real ones, flashed through his mind. Late-night bike rides with his friends. His mom calling him in for dinner. His dad teaching him how to drive. These weren't fake. They couldn't be. He clenched his fists and pushed back. The void resisted, the whispers screaming in protest. But Danny focused on the truth, on who he really was, and then, he saw her, Emily. She was still in the mirror's depths, eyes wide with fear. The shadows coiled around her, dragging her deeper. Danny reached for her. "Take my hand," he shouted. Her fingers barely grazed his before the darkness lurched, trying to tear them apart. Danny didn't let go. A spark of light erupted between them, small at first, but then growing, pulsing like a heartbeat. The darkness recoiled, the whispers shrieking. The mirror cracked, fractures spreading like lightning, and then, shatter. Danny gasped as he tumbled forward, landing outside the mirror. He was in Blackwood Manor's foyer again, the air heavy with dust and time. Emily lay beside him, coughing, eyes wild with disbelief. They were out. The mirror, now shattered into 1,000 pieces, no longer reflected their images. Instead, it revealed something far worse. Inside the shards, dozens of faces stared back. People from different decades, trapped souls who had been taken over the years. Some were crying. Some were screaming. Others simply watched, and then, one by one, the reflections faded. The house groaned, its walls trembling, as if realizing its hold had been broken. The whispers became distant, weaker, until, silence. Danny turned to Emily, his breath unsteady. "Are you okay?" She nodded, still shaken. "What the hell was that?" "I don't know," he admitted. "But I think we ended it." As they stepped outside, the air felt lighter. The house, once towering and menacing, now seemed hollow. As if it had lost something, Danny looked down at his hands, flexing his fingers. He was real, and for the first time in a long time, he was free. The house would never whisper again.